Raising money is hard. It's so hard, most companies fail at it. In this video, we'll look into traction, requirements, pitch decks, some alternative funding sources, and how to find investors. This is seed funding for startups. I'm the CEO of a company called Slidebean, and thousands of startups have used our platform for creating their pitch decks. Their success is our success, and this is why we get involved with them, and we have learned a thing or two about what works and what doesn't. I started my first company in 2011, and we failed at raising capital. I know the pain of shutting down this website you worked on countless hours, or having to email all your customers to say it's game over. The problem with that company is that we wasted so much time trying to find investors that we failed to find some fundamental flaws in our product. For Slidebean, we raised a seed round of $800K, which has allowed us to grow to a team of 25, increase our revenue to 7 digits, and become profitable in the process. And yeah, it was hard. I'm telling you this because I want you to trust my advice. I tried and I failed, and now I can look back and see why I got a no from most of the 142 investors that we pitched. Yeah, 142 to raise 800,000. So now let's talk about traction first. I have this problem with Startup Press, except for Jordan Crook, who we absolutely love. It gives new founders a false notion of how fundraising works. You read the story of Yo, an app that just sends notifications saying Yo, and how they raised $1 million seed round, and you assume that's something that anybody with a couple of lines of code can do. Most companies raise money after getting traction. Very few companies raise money with just a prototype and no users, and certainly no company raises money without a fully formed founding team. The most extreme case here is tech companies that are trying to raise money to hire their CTO. This makes no sense in the mind of an investor. Tech talent is expensive and it's scarce, and the first proof that your company is worth something is that you, the founder, the CEO, managed to find a full stack developer that would turn down this job at Google to work on this idea. As a CEO, you need to be able to find and convince that guy who joins you for the stock and not for the salary, when he could be making $150,000 a year otherwise. The reality of startup fundraising today, at least in Silicon Valley and New York, is that companies are pitching investors with traction, with excellent traction. Traction usually comes in the form of revenue. Tens of thousands of dollars per month, growing over 20, hopefully 30% month over month. I'm not making this up. Check this article by VC Elizabeth Yin. Pure play, no revenue traction counts only when you're dealing with millions of users and fantastic retention rates. So how can you get to these numbers if you don't have any money to start with? Yeah, well, the answer is bootstrapping. We bought our domain in 2013 and started working on our product, but it was only after 18 months that we managed to get any decent money to ramp up growth. It was $100K from the 500 Startups program, but we'll talk about accelerators in a minute. From May 2013 through October 2014, we bootstrapped. We did part-time consulting so we could pay our bills. We had a salary of around $1,000 each and shared an apartment. It was barely enough, but the backgrounds of the 3 founders made up for all the talent we needed at that point. No need to hire anybody. Our company burn rate was probably $3,500, including our salaries and the services that we needed. It sucked, but if you can live on a budget and put up with your coworkers while having no idea what's gonna happen, you've passed a very tough initial test for your company. Now, on startup accelerators, I've been through too many accelerators, more than I like to accept. It was a program called Startup Chili that allowed us to drop consulting and finally dedicate 100% of our time to the product. We love Startup Chili. They provide 200 startups a year with a $35K government grant, no equity in exchange. What you need to do is move down to Chile for 6 months and get involved with the local startup community. It's insane if you think about it. Free money. It might as well be all the capital you need to launch your product and start generating revenue. And we did it. We actually moved to Santiago, and this is where we launched our first beta and signed up our first few thousand customers. Now, thanks to the traction that we got here, we eventually got accepted by 500 Startups, which then provided $100,000 in funding. Plus, it allowed us to move to Silicon Valley for a few months. High-end, top-tier accelerators like 500 Startups, Y Combinator, Techstars, or Dream Adventures, they provide you with so much more than just cash. They give you an office space, they give you advice, a community of brilliant people to bounce ideas with, and more importantly, validation. The process to get in is hard and it's extremely selective, but again, it's a fantastic validation of the potential of your business. Check out this link below for more info on how to get into an accelerator. We wrote a good article about it a few months ago. There are hundreds of lesser known accelerators, and they certainly provide less value or less funding. But for many of us, they are the crash courses that we need to get to a fundable point. Now for the pitch deck. Once you feel ready to raise money and hopefully you have the traction you need to come up with a pitch deck. Now, do not try to reinvent the wheel. There's a standard pitch deck template structure most investors expect. You can just download a template for this deck on the links below. We've also prepared an in-depth video breaking down every single slide and giving you insights on how to complete each one of them. So check that out. The key points are that simple is better. And again, don't get creative and don't make it longer than 15 slides. Consider this a hard rule. Now, don't overcrowd your slides. If it doesn't fit, then it probably shouldn't go on the deck. Your pitch deck is an intro to your company, and more importantly, the story of your company and your founders. Now, don't get into advanced tech details or wild revenue projections. You can save those for the follow-up meetings. Most investors take about 4 minutes to review a deck they got over email. And if it's longer than that, chances are they'll skip it. So no point adding that information anyway. Another common mistake is treating your pitch deck like a state secret. No investor on the planet will sign an NDA for the chance to see a pitch deck. It's a rookie move that'll probably burn that connection for you. These guys look at hundreds of decks a year, and the liability of signing NDAs for each one of them is just not worth it. Don't get upset with this, but most ideas are worthless without execution. It's your ability to execute that matters. Now, if anyone seeing your pitch deck can go on and start a clone company of their own and beat you to market, then it might not be a great idea to begin with. Finding investors. I heard at 500 Startups that you need to pitch 100 investors for every 500K that you want to raise. And at least in our case, that math has held up. Getting in touch with 100 investors is no easy task, but the point here is don't expect that you'll get funded by the first or second or third or 10th investor you speak to. You need to get in front of many, many, many more. The first thing to know is which type of investor you're targeting. My experience and my advice relates to VCs and angel investors, which are normally interested in tech, high growth, high scale companies. These guys look at companies that can raise $1 million or so as a seed round and use that to get them to $5 million Series A stage in a year and a half or 2 years. This means that the company is growing 3 times annually and that there's a huge market opportunity. If you're building a more traditional business that can't sustain that sort of growth, you should aim for a different kind of investor. So first of all, leverage your LinkedIn network. Make sure you add everybody you know and tirelessly browse their connections. If you find a match, check that the investor is actively investing. You can use AngelList for that. Ask for a warm intro. This will almost guarantee a chance to share your pitch deck. Many investors just don't reply to cold emails. Then share your deck with a link. Please, don't send a PDF file and never send a PPT. That way you can track activity or remove access if they say no and then they can check it again. Once you've depleted your LinkedIn contacts, start attending startup events and befriending people. Just talk to them, add each other up, and expand your network. If you play your cards right, you can eventually request introductions from them. This is another point where accelerators are really, really useful. If you absolutely don't have a network, then that 5 or 7% that the program asks in exchange for their help becomes much more valuable now because they will unlock these contacts for you. We recently launched a free product called Founder Hub. It's a branch of Slidebean. We connect founders with potentially interested angels and accelerators. And we also have the contact information of thousands of investors that you can browse, filter, and target. But remember, cold emails should be your last resort. Now, managing investors. You'll want to keep a spreadsheet and keep a log of every conversation and the status of your relationship. Trust me, by the 5th investor you talk to, your brain will start mixing people up. You can go to Founder Hub to download a template of the spreadsheet that I actually used when we raised funding. A typical investor flow goes like this. You do an email intro. They ask for the deck and you send it over. If there's interest, maybe some follow-up questions. If that works, then you get a meeting. Now, these meetings are usually 1 hour long. They consist of a quick 10 to 15 minute pitch. Make sure that you stay on time. Using a variation of the pitch deck that you've already created, followed by a Q&A session and a discussion. Now, at this point, they will either destroy you, tell you that you're too early, or show obvious interest in investing. If you are destroyed, take it and go find a solution to the problems and the questions that they asked. You're probably not getting another chance with them, so cross that out on your spreadsheet and don't waste your time. If you're too early, fine, take it. Ask them if they'd like to stay posted on your traction. They'll normally say yes. If most investors are saying that you're too early, then it's probably right. So stop wasting time with meetings and get back to your product traction. If they agree to stay posted, make sure that you email them every month or so. It's valuable to keep the contact alive and active, and then maybe they can invest later, or maybe you can request an introduction from them. Make sure that you track those emails too. Use SlideBean to send a traceable deck and know if they actually read your updates. Now, if you're still watching and your investor says yes, then first of all, congratulations. You're part of the lucky 1% of startups that is actually able to raise seed capital. When you have a lead investor, finding others becomes a lot easier. So when an investor is interested, they'll probably ask about your terms. Seed rounds in the US are usually handled as convertible notes or SAFEs, so stay away from equity rounds if you can. We can prepare another video explaining the differences between SAFEs, convertible notes, and equity rounds, so please let us know in the comments if that's something that you'd like to see. Drop us a comment anyway and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next week.